In this video, I'm going to go over how to find the domain and range of a function. The domain of a function is a set of all possible input values, or the range of a function is a set of all possible output values, or the y's. It's important that you use the correct notation depending on your graph. If you have a graph that's just a collection of points, you need to make sure that you are listing the domain and range values using a comma to separate each value. If you're looking at a graph of any sort of line, whether it's a straight line or a curved line, you need to use inequality signs. You'll use the greater than or equal to or the less than or equal to sign for closed dots because that means the values are included. And then you'll use the greater than or the less than sign for open dots because the values are not included. So let's take this example. Here we need to find the domain and range of the function that's represented by the graph. And when I look at this graph, I just have a collection of points. I might be able to draw a line through them, but since the line is not there, I cannot treat this as a line. So since it's just 4 points, I need to think about what the coordinates for those points would be. Once I know the coordinates, I can start with finding the domain. I know that the domain is the set of all x values, or the set of all of the input values. So I look at the x value of each coordinate, and I list them, starting from left to right, or least to greatest. So my domain here is x equals -3, -1, +1, and +3. And then to find the range, I want to look at my y values in each of my coordinates. And again, listing from least to greatest or from left to right, I list what y would be equal to. In this graph, our range is y equals -2, 0, +2, and +4. Now, when we have a line, it looks a little bit different. When I'm finding the domain and range of a line graph, I need to look and see what's my smallest x value and what's my biggest x value. What's my smallest y value and what's my largest y value. So remember that your x-axis moves left to right. So I'm looking at my graph and I'm seeing what's the smallest x value or what's the farthest left I go. And then what's my greatest x value or what's the farthest right I go. And I need to list that using inequality signs. So in this case, my domain would be -2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 3. -2 is the farthest left that we go, x value-wise, and then 3 is the largest x value that's shown on this graph. So then for my y's, I'm doing something similar. Now the y-axis goes up and down. So for my range, I want to look and see what's my smallest y value, or what's the farthest down our graph goes, and then what's our largest y value, or what's the farthest up our graph goes on the y-axis. So when I look at this graph, my range would be -1 is less than or equal to y, because I have a closed dot where y is equal to -1, and y is less than or equal to 2. Again, I'm using the less than or equal to sign because I have a closed dot. So -1 is the smallest y value on this graph, and then +2 is the greatest y value on this graph. But y can be any number in between those. So let's try another line example. Again, I want to look from side to side for my domain and up and down for my range. My smallest x value is a 2, but there's an open dot at 2, so I can only use the less than sign. My greatest x value is 7, and there's a closed dot there, so I can use the less than or equal to sign. And x is anywhere in between 2 and 7. My smallest y value for my range is 1. Again, there's an open dot there, so I have to use just the less than sign. My greatest y value is a 6, and there's a closed dot there, so I can use the less than or equal to sign. And y is anywhere in between that 1 and 6. Now let's do one more. Here's another graph where I just have a bunch of points. Again, I want to look at what those coordinates would be for each point. I'm going to look at my x values to list my domain. So I have here that x is equal to -2, -1, 0, +1, and +2. And then I'm looking at the y values in my coordinates to find the range. Now here my range repeats. I have a 4, a 2, a 0 as I move from left to right. And then once I go back around, I have 2 and 4 again. I don't need to list the 2 and 4 twice. As long as I've listed it one time, it's fine. So we don't need to repeat. You just want to make sure that every value that is represented is listed in your range.